Hello and welcome to another episode of Cake Bite Presents The Making Of. I'm writer, director, producer Paige Feldman, and this week, as every week, I'm taking you inside my process of making my debut feature film. We're going from idea to premiere in real time. So last we spoke, I had pretty much just finished the first draft of the script that's going to be my debut feature as a writer-director. This contained romantic comedy ended up being 155 pages long, and before I could jump into the revisions, I needed to let it simmer. And while I let it simmer, I also went on my honeymoon. So now I'm back from France, I'm mostly recovered from jet lag, and I'm ready to tackle this revision. Now, the first thing I always do before I start a revision is come up with a plan. And this is usually where I turn to my trusty mood analysis device, because when I'm dealing with a behemoth of a script that I need to cut at least 35 pages from, ideally more like 50, I need to have a plan, otherwise it's just rearranging words and it's not actually doing anything to make the script better. But the mood analysis I've found is best used when I'm not quite sure what the things are that I need to concentrate on and fix. And when I read this draft, I saw a few clear problems that would mean that that mood analysis device, which is fantastic, but a little time consuming, just wouldn't be really necessary on this first pass. So I came up with a revision plan in a different way. And I'm going to show you all about how I did it, and I'm also going to tell you how you can replicate this process too. So, like I said, let's roll those titles and then we can jump right in. We're back, so let's dive right into this whole how did I create a revision plan thing. And I recorded my screen while I was doing this, but I did not record my face. So I know you love looking at me, but you're not going to be able to during this video. I'm just going to show you my screen and narrate exactly what I did. So let's go right in. To make a revision plan, step one is always to read your script from start to finish, not making any edits, but noting places you love and places you don't. The latter are the most important, and in fact, they're the only things that matter for this process. And that's what I'm writing down here. All my observations about my script as I read it, then some general thoughts about what I'm missing, thematic considerations to keep in mind, texture I want to add, and in rare instances, something that's working well. And that's step two. Write down all your thoughts. Brain dump your own criticisms about your script. Don't analyze them, don't second guess, don't worry about repeating. See, I wrote down here both that I should figure out Ash and Mitch's backstory, and also that I was thinking about adding a scene showing their history as kids into the film. I'm probably not adding that scene because it would mean a whole new location and working with child actors, two things that are expensive, especially working with kids. In general, though, if something is bothering you even a little, write it down. For me, there's a note I wrote wondering whether I should keep the movie confined solely to the main house setting or keep the framing scenes that I have, one at the beginning and two at the end, that set the action of the film that's within that big house into the larger world. I'm not sure whether that's a question I need to consider now, and I don't think it's a good idea to remove the framing scenes because it makes the scope of the film smaller if they're not there, but because I'm considering it, it's going on the list. Step three, now that I have this massive list of questions and concerns, is to make it feel less overwhelming by grouping all these items into categories. The best way to figure out what categories to create is to first recall which types of concerns you felt you noted the most. I immediately remembered that I mentioned backstory and kissing and arguing multiple times, so I created those headers, then scanned through my list and cut and pasted all the times I mentioned either of those things into their proper category. What's interesting to me is that I only actually noted anything about backstory 3 times, but it was one of the 2 things I thought that I noted the most, and so it was clearly at the forefront of my mind. Anyway, then I looked through the other items left on the list after I noted backstory and kissing and arguing, and tried to group some of them together in my mind. I saw that there were notes only about Ash, notes only about Mitch, and notes about both of them that didn't have to do with kissing or arguing. So I created categories for all those things. Ash's conflict in character, Mitch's conflict in character, And Mitch and Ash, other interpersonal conflict, which included things that weren't directly related to kissing or arguing, which is apparently very few things. So then I'm left with Mitch and Ash's interpersonal conflicts with people other than each other, which is only about 10% of the movie regardless. It's in those framing scenes I talked about. And finally, I have overarching notes about structural changes, the length, the themes, and basically other big picture stuff. Okay, everything is categorized, but all that does is make this giant list a little easier to swallow. Step 4 is pinpointing what's most important. Because I can't possibly fix every single issue in one revision. I go through all categories and highlight a maximum of half of these concerns. And I round up in the case of an odd number of concerns in a category. The ones that I instinctively feel are most important are the ones that I highlight. So in general big picture notes, I leave the length and question of scope and setting for another draft and decide to focus on moving this video that I'm talking about here, which is currently a mid-third act reveal, to the midpoint or just beyond it, and really focusing on the thematic issues in the story. For backstory, I focus on figuring out the backstory, obviously, and adding some poetic synchronicity to Mitch and Ash's relationship. And, I copied and pasted a kissing arguing thing there, so moving that, and also highlighting it. Which brings us to the kissing and arguing section. And the thing that I just moved and highlighted from the backstory part is also the same thing as the two other issues I highlight in this category. How Mitch and Ash need to earn the kisses, and I need to make sure they earn them, and how the arguments don't yet advance the relationship that they have. And really, looking at this category, it's several fairly repetitive overarching notes, and then specific examples of what's not working, and one thing that does. I apparently had a lot of thoughts on this one category. So I go through the other categories and highlight all the things I find most important. I don't highlight anything in the other conflict category, though, because it doesn't feel important to worry about those conflicts at this point when Mitch and Ash's relationship is at the forefront of the story and also needs so much work. And that's not to say I won't address them in this rewrite, it's just that I won't prepare myself to address them. And that's what a lot of this process is about, preparing myself for the revision, getting ready to do the pre-writing that I need to do for the revision, because yes, there will be pre-writing. Also, I want to note that I'm going 100% by feel on this. I obviously need to cut the script down from 155 pages to ideally 95 to 105, but right now, that does not feel as important to me as getting everyone's emotional arcs squared away. But if you're doing this, there is no right way, quote, right way to determine what's important or not. Unless you're also at a first revision like me and only highlighted individual page number notes, because really, if you're doing that, that's just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. You're not going to actually do significant work to make your script better if you're only working on individual page notes in a first revision. But if you're looking at your list and you see one individual page note, one scene that you know is wrong and you know how to fix it and you just want to do it now, fine, do it now. Like, fix it. Because if it's going to bother you that much, better to just jump in. But just know you'll probably have to rip it up later to conform with the rest of your revision. Or maybe not. I mean, there's always at least one scene or moment in every script I write that barely changes at all from first to final draft. And usually it's just one. I said at least. I don't know why. It's usually just one. Anywho, step 5. Now that you know what's important, it's time to figure out what order you need to address all of these things in because, surprise, the highlighted notes are going to be your focus for this revision. I don't know if that's actually a surprise or not, but, go with it. Anyway, I look back at everything I'm highlighting and notice that it's all about Mitch and Ash's relationship. Whether they're kissing or arguing or dealing with things from their past, those are the things that my brain is focused on, and that's going to be the overarching theme of my rewrite. And since Mitch and Ash's relationship is the theme of my rewrite, I need to make sure I understand the relationship. So the first thing I need to do is figure out Mitch and Ash's backstory, their history together, and why they have all of these issues when they're coming together right now in this moment. Because, surprise, what I thought was an enemies to lovers romance is actually a second chance romance, kind of enemies to lovers. But anyway, we'll get into that later when I write the backstory. So once I've written their backstory, I also need to understand who they are right now. So it's time for some character work. The second thing I'm doing is figuring out each of their greatest fears and limiting beliefs. This is also where I consider theme and figure out what Ash's job is. He was initially a digital content creator, but I decided halfway through writing that wasn't working. And notice as I'm creating these steps, I'm checking back through my highlighted lists to see what I'm missing. When I have all my character work done, I'll map out how each argument and kiss shifts and shapes Mitch and Ash's relationship, starting by making a general map of how the relationship should shift, and then going back into each individual argument/kiss and outlining how those pieces fit into the greater arcs. This is also where I'll confront the structural change of moving a reveal from mid-act 3 to mid-act 2, and hopefully use it to make the repetitive segments more dynamic. And finally, I'll plan out where to drop in the remaining issues. Ash's refusal to say Kaddish, which is a Jewish morning prayer, the opportunities for Ash and Mitch to be honest with each other and how that affects their relationship, and Mitch's anxiety about getting into her psychology master's program and her decision of whether she should quit songwriting to pursue psychology or keep going with her songwriting. After I do all that work, then, and only then, do I put pen to paper and start the physical, actual rewrite, the thing that you think of as a rewrite. Okay, so my to-do list is done. And now I can do step 6, which is to make a list of all the things I'm not going to worry about this time around and why. This step is entirely optional, but I like making this list to help myself let go of these important things for now, because they are important. I'm just not working on them now, and focus on the task at hand. There can always, always, always be more rewrites, and there always, always, always will, basically. So here are the things that I'm not worrying about this time. 1, length. I'll try to cut, but the emotional growth of my main characters isn't really working, and cutting pages isn't the right place to focus my attention and energy just yet. Number 2, questions of scope. Those questions are more related to budget and length than to plot. When I do a pass where cutting is paramount, that's when I'll confront these questions. Number 3, anything outside Mitch and Ash's relationship. Mitch and Ash's relationship is 90% of this movie, and is where the vast majority of my notes are centered. Once the relationship works, then I can worry about questions outside the relationship and the relationships to other people in the world. So, that's how I made my rewrite plan. And if you're finding this video helpful, please hit the like button. That little show of support means a ton. And if you're working on a script, novel, or story of any kind where this video might help you, I'd love to hear about what you're working on, so let me know in the comments. And now, to recap, here is how to make your rewrite plan. Step 1, read your script, or novel, or story, or whatever you're writing. Read it. Step 2, write down all observations you have about your story. The positive ones, yes, but more importantly, the questions, criticisms, and anything that bothers you about your story. Remember, we're revising. We're not patting ourselves on the back just yet. Step 3, group all your observations into categories. It'll help you see more clearly what you find important to work on. Step 4, highlight at most half of your observations in each category. The things that speak to you most strongly to fix, puzzle out, or work on. Step 5, what do you need to know, do, or prepare to fix the things you highlighted? Write those steps down in the order you need to do them, or that makes the most sense to do them. Very rarely when I am revising a first draft can I just dive into the on-the-page edits. I usually need to re-outline, get more information about characters, or find places to add or subtract information. And this kind of restructuring goes more smoothly when there's a plan. Start with what's crucial for you to know, then work your way down to things that are smaller and more specific. If you find some things that don't quite fit into your workflow, maybe you can save them for the next rewrite. And speaking of, step 6. If you want, write down all the things you notice that you can't work on for this rewrite to help you let go of them. You can't fix everything all at once, and there can always be a next time. Remember, there's no limit on the number of revisions you can do, so take it step by step. And what you're left with when you finish this process is a list of things to do to prepare you to make your script better. And here's my list. So those 5 steps are what I'll be focusing on here on this channel for the next few weeks. First up is that number 1 in blue, write Mitch and Ash's backstory. And I'll tell you all about that next week here on Cake Fight Presents The Making of. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next week. Bye.